And he's clearly made that determination. It's 50%, 25 that was imposed on India earlier and 25 that he's now announced via this executive order, which means in Asia, India is the only country that will have to pay 50% tariff. China, who's still negotiating with the United States, they have a 90-day grace period. They face about 30% as of now. South Korea, that just cracked a deal a few weeks ago, faces 15%. The same goes for Japan. Indonesia, Philippines, they are tagged at about 19%. Vietnam, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka all face tariffs about 20% because they perhaps gave in to what Donald Trump wanted. India has drawn the line on multiple issues. As far as the trade deal goes, agriculture, dairy, those are sectors that India does not want to give leeway to the United States or the kind of access that the United States wants. And as far as Russian oil is concerned, imports from Russia will continue, has been the stance of India, because that is in our interest. That is how we keep our demand going without the price going up globally as well. Before I open this up to our guests who continue to be with us on this rolling coverage, my colleague Sanjay Suri, in fact, joins us from Washington, D.C. I believe you're outside the White House, and there are tremors here in India as to what has transpired there in the Oval Office behind you. What explains this kind of tantrum, as many would call it, from Donald Trump?
You know, Poonam, we can look at this issue, that, and of course there are many issues to look at, but fundamentally it is this, that this is Trump being Trump. And Trump has felt miffed several times over. India has not done what he wanted, and fundamentally for Trump, personal irritation is the same thing as government policy. He has wanted India to do his thing on oil. India said no. And the question is not what India said and the rationale that the Indian government offered and the facts that it offered. That is not the issue. For him, is the issue that's fundamental, that he wanted India to do something. India has said no. And that follows his demand earlier through the trade talks that India should simply throw open its market to agricultural and dairy produce from the US. The Indian government can not do that. No Indian government can do that. It's unthinkable for any Indian government to contemplate such a step. This is something that he was miffed over earlier. He has felt slighted and he's in a punishing mood because that's the kind of space he comes from. He is the assumed global dictator, the Dunya ka Dada, and if some country thinks that they, as he sees it, that they will do their own thing and not his thing, he will be out to punish them.
And that's the stance that he seems to have taken, because there was a 90-day grace period that was given to China. That concession wasn't made for India, even though we are seeing negotiations on. Later this month, Sanjay, is when we are expecting the negotiating team from the United States to be in India. Will that still be on track now?
Well, there may be a team that comes at the official level. Some conversation may continue. It may well be discontinued. It's really too early to say. But the fact is that there are red lines on agriculture, for instance, on oil import, for instance. These are the two major red lines. India cannot change its position on those. And these are the two positions where the US government wants a shift from India, in fact, a surrender from India. So really, what is the official meeting going to be about? I mean, there may be officials coming to Washington or officials from here going to New Delhi. They will inevitably come up against these two red lines. And what could India give on those? India has held firm and has no option but to hold firm on these.
Absolutely. Sanjay, thank you so much for getting us that perspective from the United States. We'll keep coming back to you, of course, as we get in more reactions. Before I get in PK Basu and Saket Mishra, who continue to be with us on this broadcast, let's listen into some more reactions that are pouring in, because back home here, like I said, there are tremors over what Donald Trump has just done, and the political fight is also escalating.
Wants to import of Russian oil to India, sir.
I see. Well, I mean, I don't think that's particularly good news for us. But, you know, obviously if that takes our total tariffs to 50%, then that's going to make our goods unaffordable to a lot of people in America. And in particularly when you're looking at these percentages, you have to compare them with the tariffs being levied on some of our competitors. And I'm afraid if you look at people like Vietnam, Indonesia, Philippines, even Bangladesh and Pakistan have lower tariffs than us, then ultimately people will not be buying goods from us in America if they can buy them cheaper elsewhere. So that's not very good for our exports to America. This means we need to very seriously diversify to other countries and other markets which may be interested in what we have to offer. We now have an FTA with the UK, we are talking to the EU. There are many countries in which hopefully we would be able to, but in the short term it is definitely a blow. I don't think we can sugarcoat it.
When President Trump was asked about the imports of America when we look at the Russia's export to USA, sir, he said, I don't know about what America imports from Russia, either it's uranium or petroleum products, sir.
Uranium, palladium, there are various things they're importing from Russia. But there is unfortunately a certain double standard involved. They have given the Chinese a 90-day break, but the Chinese are importing far more Russian oil than we are. So clearly this has not been a particularly friendly gesture from a country we thought was well disposed towards us, or an administration that we thought was well disposed. Very clearly we have to act accordingly, and we will have to learn our lessons from this experience. I think there is certainly a likelihood there will be some pressure within India now to impose comparable reciprocal tariffs on American exports to India. So I think we're going to have to really start looking at other trading partners much more in these circumstances.
From past a decade, we have seen the entitlement of India to the United States. So can you see?
Our panelists join us here to decode what's been transpiring. Ajay Dua, former Commerce Secretary, is also joining us. Saket Mishra and PK Basu are continuing with us as well. Ajay Dua, I want to ask you this. Why is it that Donald Trump thinks he can bulldoze India the way he's doing it? I mean, what explains this 50% tariff that's been levied on India?
I think it is his concern or his conviction that India wants to badly enter into a bilateral trade agreement with the US, and that thinking that the additional tariffs India would accept in the expectation that when the BTA is signed, whether it's this month or a month or two later, all these would be removed, and India would have given without really compromising on one or two concessions on agriculture, which he might then make, that India would accept the situation. I think his reading is that India wants the US in
I believe we've encountered some audio issue there with you, Ajay Dua. We'll try and reconnect that and get a better line with you. But PK Basu, I want to ask you this. You know, the art of making a deal was something that Donald Trump was often spoken of. From the deal maker to a tantrum thrower, is that what he's become?
Yes, I think this is what he considers the art of the deal. Throw tantrums, shout from the rooftops, and there's something called TACO. Trump always
chickens out.
Right? So, these are threats. But I think the important thing to understand is that what he is saying in today's tweet and today's executive order is that India will face these tariffs 21 days from today. That is from noon Eastern US time on the 27th of August. A US delegation is coming to India on the 25th of August. So this is not the end of the matter. It's not as if he has imposed this with effect from today. He has imposed this with at least a 21-day warning. Plus, there are certain provisions that only come into effect almost a month later, around 17th or 27th of September. So it is not immediate. I think your coverage should emphasize this point, that it's not immediate. It is still a negotiating ploy. It is very much what Trump considers to be the art of the deal, where he threatens and shouts from the rooftop. I don't think his methods are working that well with India. But I think it's also important to understand that our negotiators thought we were very close to a deal. Trump himself was tweeting until 3 or 4 weeks ago that that we're about to have a deal with India, we're very close, etc.
Correct.
But something has, some bee in his bonnet has gone off, and that seems to be Russian oil. Today, his envoy to Russia, Steve Witkoff, met Putin, and presumably that meeting didn't go very well, or at least didn't go as well as Trump expected, and so he is going bonkers with this. Now, the simple fact is, I think Putin realizes, and we should realize, that Trump cannot afford oil prices to zoom up. If there is a complete ban on imports of Russian oil, that will be disastrous for oil prices. Oil prices will go up sharply.
Absolutely.
And that will destroy Trump's agenda. So he cannot afford to push oil prices up. I think Putin recognizes this. We should recognize it as well.
And that was one of the reasons
But
why the United
it is
States
not
wanted
our
us to
oil
buy
that is
Russian
suffering,
oil in the
it is
first
our
place.
other exports.
US nudged us to buy Russian oil just last year or a year before that because they didn't want the prices to go up.
According to
We'll try and reconnect that line with PK Basu. But Ajay, I believe you're back and I saw your hand going up. But I'll just come to you in a moment. Saket Mishra, I ask you to wait with us as well. Zaka Jacob, managing editor, joining us, getting us more perspective on this. Zaka, how do you read this? The highest in Asia, only on par with Brazil around the world. What exactly is on Trump's mind?
Look, I think one thing that and affairs over the last few days. So it's 25% plus 25%. But there's one thing in the fine print which I thought was interesting, was that this new order, the 25% extra Russian oil, will come into effect 21 days from now. So today is the 6th of August. It'll effectively come into effect from the 27th of August, which means there's another 3 weeks for negotiators on both sides to try and see if they can arrive at some kind of a middle ground which is satisfactory to both parties, at least as far as the Russian oil import part is concerned. So it is also, in effect, the 21 days, what it also means is that the US negotiating team, which is next expected to be in New Delhi, I think in the last week of August, if I'm not mistaken, on the 25th, it allows them to try and have one last shot at whether they can actually negotiate and bargain and arrive at some kind of a concession, if not on the entire 50%, but certainly on the import of Russian oil part. Also, a lot can change between now and the end of the month, because the war itself, we're given to understand, is at a tricky situation. And if we know that Witkoff has met with Putin earlier today, Mr. Doval will be meeting with